Okay, good morning. So with the size of these amudim, it's very difficult to be doing much in the way of review, so we will have to move forward. But nevertheless, at least for today's Gemara, we will be able to touch on some of the aspects that we discussed yesterday. So we're holding on Dalet and base on the bottom, the two dots. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Af al pi shekara Adam. Kriyash Shema basic says even though a person already said Kriyash Shema in shul, mitzvah l'kroisei al mitase, he nevertheless still has a mitzvah to read it on his bed. So a few things here that we need to discuss. Number one, this is brought down in halacha that there is a mitzvah to say Kriyash Shema al mitase. If you look in Shulchan Aruch, Archaim Reish Lamed Tes, there's a halacha that's brought down that a person should say Shema on his bed. Now, what do we mean when we're saying say Shema on your bed? That we're saying that this is a mitzvah. As many have noted, and the Iri here points out, this Kriyash Shema Mitasai is not a mitzvah in the normal sense that we're saying it's a mitzvah midaraisa. This is to get rid of the mazikim. The Meiri quotes Yerushalmi for this. I don't know why he had to jump to the Yerushalmi. We'll see later on today on Hey that we're going to talk about mazikim. So we're not, number one, we're not saying it's a mitzvah in any midaraisa sense. Number two, the person who already said Shema in shul, there's no reason to assume necessarily the minhag of the Rishonim that they used to daven very early. Could be they davened later. We have no idea on the specifics of this situation, if the person was davening early or not. Either way, what is clear is that the person who had already davened, potentially after the days, had already said Shema, is nevertheless still being told to say Shema when he goes to bed. So just on this as a background, it would sound like what? It's not that it's a mitzvah midaraisa to say Shema mitase, even though from the simple reading of the words b'shach b'cha, you might think that we're learning out the time to read the Shema. Debatable if you're going to sleep when people are sleeping, but maybe when you go to sleep, you should actually read it. After all, the Torah is saying b'shach b'cha. You might have as a matter of pshat. That's the ideal time to say the Shema. So what we're saying here is that that's not the actual mitzvah. This is a person who's already Mekayah the mitzvah of Shema. He already daven might say Sakechavim, and we're nevertheless still saying they should say it over at night. Again, not going to be a full mitzvah. It's just a good idea. As we will see, it gets rid of mazikim. The Malay Harayim points out in the back of the Gemara, you'll see Malay Harayim is Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Yalish from Dinov. Anyone know where Dinov is? The town in Poland. Who came from Dinov? The most famous rabbi, Hasidic rabbi from Dinov, was Tzvi Elimelech Shapiro, otherwise known as the Benai Yisascha. Why it's pronounced Yisascha? Whole question we can't get into right now. Anyhow, the rabbi from Dinov, there's this Rabbi Yalis, Malay Harayim, was a student of the Chayza. I think he died in the early 1800s. And in one of his forms, the one we have on Shas here in the back of the Gemaras, he says, one second, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, didn't we say yesterday about Rabbi Shua ben Levi, his Shita on Shema? What do we say about Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Shita on Shema? We say Rabbi Shua ben Levi disagrees with the Chacham. What does Rabbi Shua ben Levi hold about Shema? Rabbi Shua ben Levi holds, remember, tefillas, be'emtza, right? He holds that the tefillas were be'emtza tiknum. They were meant to be instituted in between the two Shmas, the Shema of the morning and the Shema of the evening, and in between that you have your Shemona Esreis. So the actual time that you're saying Shema is where? On your bed. You don't have a mitzvah to say Shema by Shemona Esrei. So notice then what the halacha did here. If Rabbi Shua ben Levi is going on his own shita, right, we're still on the bottom. We're just doing Ian share in the beginning. Bottom of Dalam base. Look at Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi himself holds that the mitzvah of saying Kriyash Shema al mitasai, that is, in fact, when you're supposed to be saying Shema. There's no mitzvah of smichas gula to tefillah. Remember, yesterday we had an Ibai Sema Kro, Ibai Sema Svar, Ibai Sema Svar. We had a back and forth. Is it a Svar? Is it a pasuk? Two different reasons that Rabbi Shua ben Levi gave for his shita. He disagrees with Rabbi Yechon. You don't need smichas gula to tefillah. So according to Rabbi Shua ben Levi, where's the ideal time to say Shema? B'shach b'cha. You don't have to say it before Shemona Esrei. So according to him, maybe in fact that would be when you're actually saying Shema. That would then be a mitzvah. You wouldn't have to say that it doesn't really mean literal mitzvah. It actually, that's the mitzvah of saying Shema. But we don't pass like a Shum Levi. We hold that there is a gula even at night. Like the pasuk says in Parashas Re'eh, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Haitzi eschem mitzrayim loyla." And we have a steer, and the pasuk also says, "Be'etzem hayom hazeh haitzi eschem eretz Mitzrayim." So we answered up that there was a gula me'urta, but it was not a huge gula, and then there was a gula by Yemama, it was a major gula. That's our way of being able to explain it. So for the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan, who requires gula to tefillah, so we say Shema at night, and then we say Shema Esrei. This mitzvah can't be a literal mitzvah. It's not the main point of Shema. It's just a something, get rid of Mazikim. But for Rabbi Shmuel Levi himself, so we hold not like Rabbi Shmuel Levi, and nevertheless we still take his position about saying Shema by your bed. We still adopt it, but we don't hold of him substantively. So mamash, the words that he's saying, now according to Rabbi Shmuel Levi, remember, the person is saying Shema in the shul because that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing in the shul because they don't pass like him. He's still saying it's a mitzvah to say it at night because that's his shita. But we take his Shema by the bed. We agree, we do it, but it's not a real mitzvah. Even though for B'shuv Leib, when he said mitzvah, perhaps he actually meant mitzvah in a literal sense. Okay, keep on going. Says the Amara Rabbi Yosi, as they point out on the sides, probably not Rabbi Yosi, it would be a Tana, most likely Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Yosef. Either way, my kra, what does it mean in pasuk when you're telling me now it's a mitzvah to say the Shema at night? The way do we see this in the pasuk? Again, you could have said b'shach b'cha, but we're going to say something similar. Micro, rigzu v'al techato, a person should be trembling and not sin. Imru b'levavchem, should say in the hearts, says Rashi, amu mashakos v'al levavchem, say the pasuk where it talks about on your hearts. Al mashkavchem, say it on your beds, as Rashi says, like it says b'shach b'cha, v'doim musel, and then you should be silent. Why? As Rashi points out, b'shina, you're silent because you're falling asleep. Okay? So, what we're having over here is the basic source to tell us the idea that a person should be saying Kriya Shema al Hamita. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman then, as follows: Im Talmid Chacham hu einay tzarich. If he's a Talmid Chacham, if he's a Torah scholar, he doesn't need to say Kriya Shema al Hamita. Why not? Says Rashi. Shiragul b'mishnasai. Because what's he doing at night before he goes to bed? What are you doing? You go to sleep. You think about what you learned that day. You go over various different Gemaras and Mishnayos and things of that sort. So you don't have to say Shema. You're going over your learning. That's sufficient. It says even a Talmid Chacham has to say at least one pasuk of Rachamim. I'm placing my life in the Rebbeinu Shalom's hands, right? And Hadisa Isa Hashem. So we want HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be paid to us. Fine. So the Gemara now continues, and the Gemara says as follows. Now we're going, the reason this next Gemara comes about is because we just said, Rigzu ve'al techato. The Pasuk told us in Tehillim, beginning of Tehillim, that a person should be trembling and not to fear. And that was our source for Shema. And now we're looking at this Pasuk again. What does it mean, Rigzu ve'al techato? A person should be trembling and not be sinning. So Amar Levi Bracham Amar Shimon Lakish Lo Adam Yargiz Adam Yetzer Tov Al Yetzer Hara Shenema Rigzu Al Tachato. A person should always be Yargiz. What does Yargiz here mean? A person should be trembling. It doesn't really work in the words. Lo Adam Yargiz Adam Yetzer Tov Al Yetzer Hara means the person should always be starting up his Yetzer Tov on his Yetzer Hara. Look at Rashi. Sheyasem Milchama Am Yetzer Hara. A person should always be fighting with his Yetzer Hara. Shenema rigzu v'al techato. A person should be roigez and not to be sinning. If you look at the Rashbam, there's a Rashbam in Bereshis. The pasuk says when Yosef was sending the brothers back to Yaakov, right after he had revealed to himself that he's Yosef and Yosef. So what do you say? Vayishalach esecha vayelechu vayerem lem al tirgezu badarach. What does it mean, al tirgezu? The Rashbam brings down a number of different opinions, but he holds that what it most likely means is it means fear, fearful, being fearful. Here we're not saying roiges means fear. Here we're saying it means to be a roiges, to be a ragzon, to be somebody who's angry, to be pushy and starting up. Who are you starting up with? Rizu. You starting up with who? The Yetzer Hara, and therefore you'll win. Therefore you'll be able to beat him. So as a riot to this, I thought about a Gemara in Avodah Zarah. The Gemara tells Avodah Zarah, you're dying off on the bottom. Look there in the Gemara. And then it goes up to Yudzayin Beis as well. The Gemara says, I think it's Reb Chanina, forgetting the other man, Omar, two Merom are walking, and they get to a fork in the road. And the Gemara says they had a choice. They can either go by the fork on the right, which would take them to a church, would take them past the church. Or the fork on the left, that would take them to past the base zone. So the Gemara doesn't say who says to who. One of them says, let's go by the church. Because if we go by the church, it's not a problem. Why is it not a problem? Rashi explains. The Gemara in Yuma Samach Tes tells us that when they came back, after they destroyed the first base on Mikdash, so they came back to rebuild the second bias. So they wanted to rebuild it. And when they realized that they still have the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah, so they davened to their Rebbeinu Shalom to be able to get rid of it. How did they get rid of it? So they made a special prayer. Remember the Gemara? It came out like a line. They shechted it, and that was the end of the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah. Amazing Gemara, because you look there, the Gemara says that the fiery line that comes out, that is the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah. Where did it live? In the Kodesh HaKodashim. I'll leave that on the side for a moment. Second, so the Gemara says that one rabbi said, "Oh, let's go by the church because it's not going to be the pagan temple. There's no Yetzer Hara. It's easy for us." And one said, "No, let's go by the Batei Zionis because then we'll be able to conquer our Yetzer Hara." So the Gemara says that's what they did, and they went by, and the Zionists was sort of like a red light district, and they sort of went inside so that they wouldn't be exhibiting their wares when these rabbis were walking by. So the other one says to the rabbi wants to go by the church. Said, how did you know? He says the Torah is going to work to ensure that we wouldn't be falling prey to the Yetzer Hara. That's the Gemara. What is mashma from this Gemara? I always think about this Gemara as a proof. Start up with your Yetzer Hara to make sure your Yetzer Tov wins. Take on the test. I want to be clear. This is not the situation of like Ramesh Feinstein coming to answer a tshuva, right? Well, your great Zayda, what did he answer? Somebody asked the shah, is he allowed to go on a bus? On a bus, inappropriate people looking. So how could you go on a bus? He doesn't answer, Riggs of Al-Tachato. That's not why you're going on a bus. You're going on a bus. His answer was, because you're going to work. You have to go on the bus. It's not a word of Riggs of Al-Tachato to go on a bus and there's going to be inappropriate looking people. That's not what you're Mekayim Riggs of Al-Tachato. Over there, you're going in order to be able to Mekayim your Parnasa. And hopefully you won't be falling nichshel to this situation. We're talking about a situation where somebody doesn't have to go on a bus. Right? He's going to the beach in Tel Aviv because he wants to Mekayim Riggs of Al-Tachato. You heard of such a thing? Imagine somebody came to the rabbi. Everybody knows the Gemara and the story, Rebbe Lopian. It was Rebbe Lopian. Right? As an elderly person, he says to them, I have to go to the beach. They told me, the doctor, I need to see air. I have a problem breathing. I need to see air. So he said, okay. He says, it's a mutter. He says, I'm 80 years old and I still notice what's going on. So what are you telling me it's mutter? You can't just say, you have to think about a specific situation and figure out, is there another way to get to see air without having to be in inappropriate places? Is Rizav al Techato the halachic normal medium behavior? Look at the Gemara in Sanhedrin Kuf Zayin. Over there, the Gemara tells us exactly the opposite. The Gemara says, well, a person is not supposed to put himself lidei nisayin. We daven every single day after we say, right, the Brachot, we say the brachos, right? But lidei nisayin, we beg Hashem not to put us in front of nisayin. Why? Because the Gemara brings it right from David HaMelech. David HaMelech was unhappy that it said okay, Abraham, Yaakov, it didn't say okay, David. So he wanted it to be included for him. So Baruch Shalom said, I'll include you But you gotta understand, all the other guys that they had Nisyanis, and you're getting one up on them. I told them nothing about the Nisyanis. They just got them. I'm telling you ahead of time, they're gonna get a Nisyan, and just be aware. And David Amelch Miyad had the Ma'aseh Hashem, and he was Nifshal, and that's why it doesn't say Alekei David. So I will conclude with this. Instead of doing our Dvar Torah at the end, we'll do it here. The Ramban, this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayera, at the end of the Parsha, we're not up to there. We were doing the second Aliyah, but okay, we'll go to the seventh Aliyah. V'ha'ali kim nisoas Avraham. There's an Nisayon for the Akedah. What does the Ramban write? What does Nisyanis do for a person? It's Yetzi Mikeach al Apoel. Taking a Nisayon brings out from what is potential energy that a person has into kinetic. It makes it real. So a person has the ability to be conquering a certain level of spirituality, and he hasn't yet done it, and the Nisayon is going to bring him there. The Rebbeinu Shalom is, for sure, going to be bringing Nisyanis on each and every one of us. Baruch Hashem, as we grow Maila Maila, we're going to get more and more Nisyanis from the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's the way it works. So the question really is now is the Yerushalmi says the Rambam brings in Hilchos Deis Paragimel about a different topic, right? Over there dealing with what is the Torah says is mutter, and you're making new additional isurim on yourself. Lo dayecha masha asa l'cha Torah, right? It's not enough with the Torah asked you. You want to bring on yourself more isurim, right? That was the shita of the Rambam brings down that a person shouldn't add on additional isurim on themselves. So I'm saying to you the same thing. Lo dayecha l'cha the nisyanis that the Rebbeinu Shalom is giving you. It's not enough in the nisyanis. You are sufficiently satisfied. I don't have enough nisyanis. I have to go challenge myself more. That's how we'll leave it for now. But there's clearly an intimation of a different approach. Clearly, the Gemara here from Rish Lakish and the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Yud Zayin is telling that there were people who felt that they wanted to take on themselves additional nisyanis. Moving on, says the Gemara, we're at the dot here on 6 lines down from the top. If a person is successful in fighting off the Yetzer Hara just by virtue of his will, wonderful. Ve'im lav yasik b'Torah. Right, this was the original, the will to power from Nietzsche. Okay, nobody liked the joke. Fine. Moving on. If not, study Torah. Why should you study Torah? The Gemara Kedushin on Lamed tells us. What does the Gemara tell us? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu samtem, right? Samtam. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Yetzer Hara, Barasi Torah Tavlin, right? There's one way to beat the Yetzer Hara, and that is with Torah. Shenemar, what's the proof? Imul b'levavchem, as we just said, Imul b'levavchem mishkavchem, right? You learn Torah. And if you do so, then you will have success over the Yetzer Hara. Im nitzchei mutav, fantastic. If you are successful, wonderful. V'im lav yikar krishma, shenemar al mishkavchem. So then you try to say Shema. If it doesn't work with learning Torah, then at least try to Mekabel ol Malchus Shemayim, Mekabel ol Mitzvahs, and maybe that will work. And this is also a fail-safe way. But if not, I should mention, I didn't mention before that that in Shulchan Aruch we were passing like Shubin Levi's idea of saying Shema on Mita. Well, we're doing it because of Mazik and not because of a mitzvah. That there in Reish Lamed Tes, the Ramah writes that a person is not allowed to eat or drink after they say the Shema. Right? Then you're done. You go to sleep. So what happens if a person can't fall asleep? He's eating, he's drinking, and so you have to say Kriya Shema Lamita again. So he says, what happens if you can't fall asleep? So it's like counting sheep. Keep on saying Kriya Shema Lamita until you fall asleep. Yeah. Okay. So here we're saying that a person should learn, and that'll be a way to beat the Yetzer Hara. If it doesn't work with the learning, then say Shema. And if that doesn't work, the end of the pasuk is a different way of chopping up the pasuk. But now what we will see is that a person should remember the day of death. So 3 possible shlavim of how to beat up on the Yetzer Hara. 1, Torah. 2, Shema. 3, remembering the day of death. Again, if you look at the Mishnah and Avos, you have other ways of remembering oneself. Remember where you're going, where you came from, where you're going. These are all ways of attempting to take one away from falling prey to the Yitzhar Hara. Okay, continues the Gemara. Amar Rav Levi bar Chama, Amar Rav Shimon Lakish. What does it mean in pasuk? Again, why are we breaking down this Gemara? This Gemara is being brought down because we just said something from Rav Levi bar Chama, the name of Rish Lakish. So we'll bring down another maimer. My desiv etan l'chas lukas even v'ater v'amitzvah shekosamti l'hoyroisam. The pasuk says that Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, "I'm going to give you the stone tablets and the Torah and the mitzvah shekosamti l'hoyroisam." All right, I'm going to give you the Torah and the mitzvah that I have written for you to teach them. Just to be clear, another thing in this week's parsha where Avraham Avinu is told by the Rebbeinu Shalom, he's going to tell him all about Sodom, right? Why kiyadantev l'man asher yitzaveh banav as beisei achrav v'shamu derech Hashem la'aseh stok or mishpat. And what is that? So it's a similar way over here that, and this actually is very relevant to our topic on Sundays. In fact, this is a Gemara that is a fundamental proof to one of the positions of the debate, as we will be seeing in the future weeks and months. Listen to the Gemara. The Gemara says the following: Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, is giving the luchas even v'atorah mitzvah shekasabti lahiroisam, and we darshan like this. Says Rish Lakish luchas elu asaris hadibris, Torah ze mikra, v'hamitzvah zu mishnah, asher kasabti elu nevim uksuvim, lahiroisam ze Gemara, melamed shekulam nitnu l'Moshe misinai. So what does it mean when the Rebbeinu Shalom is telling Moshe Rabbeinu that he's given him all these different things? He's given him the luchos and the Torah and the mitzvah. Asher kasabti l'Moshe says Rish Lakish, each one means something else. It means Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu the Chumash, and he gave him the Tanakh, and he gave him the Mishnah, and he gave him the Gemara. Everything was given to Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai. Within the debate, which we're not going to be able to delve into very deeply here, the debate is as follows: is how much of the Torah was given to Moshe Rabbeinu? Was Moshe Rabbeinu given the entirety of the Torah, from every little single, like the Yerushalmi says, "Afilu masha talmud vasik asad leskadesh." Even the little vertlach that will be coming up here ourselves, that's something Moshe Rabbeinu already thought of on Har Sinai? Or are we saying that what Moshe Rabbeinu came up with on Har Sinai is a more modest type of Torah Sheba'al Peh? He came up with a Torah Sheba'al Peh, but a more modest type of Torah Sheba'al Peh. This Gemara stands athwart that, right? This Gemara is going to be used as a source by what we would consider to be the maximalist positions of the Torah Sheba'al Peh that was given to Moshe at Sinai, and Moshe Rabbeinu was given absolutely everything. Good? Okay. I don't think that I would necessarily agree. We'll do the Rashi now. So I think Rashi is going on trying to make a different point, and that is in terms of how one deals with each part of Torah. Right? We always say, like we said yesterday, a person comes min asada ba'erev, right? Nichnas beis hakneses, imraga likreis kairei, ve'imraga lishnei shaina. Right? It's how a person deals with each part of Torah. When it comes to Tanakh, you're kairei. When it comes to Mishnah, you're shaina. So when Rashi's saying zem mikra, right? Es luchos even v'Torah mitzvah. So the Gemara just darshan Torah zem mikra. Torah is mikra. What is mikra? Rashi says chumash mitzvah likreis, but it's a mitzvah to be kairei. Mishnah, when the pasuk says that mitzvah is Mishnah, how do you approach Mishnah? Sheis asku Mishnah. You're Isaac in Mishnah. By the way, this does relate to Gemara later on in Brachot. We're not going to get into it right now. I really don't want to go on too many tangential points in such a long Amud. But if you look at the Gemara, the Gemara says on Chavches Beis, the Gemara says that a person, when there was a rabbi who was passing away, Rabbi Lezer, so he said, Rabbi Lezer was passing away. ונזכבן לחייל מבוא, אומר להם, נזהרו בכבוד חבריכם, ומונו בניכם מן ההיגיון. If you look at Rashi over there, Rashi says, "Lo targimu b'mikra yetzer midai." You shouldn't study mikra too much. You shouldn't study Tanakh too much because it's mishum damash, because it takes you too much. Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Gemara in Avodah Zarah on Chav Zayin, the Gemara tells us shining minas to mashra. If anybody was here for the classes that we did about secular studies, some people wanted to say that about that as well. Certain things draw you away from Torah. So, as it were, we're saying, don't study Tanakh too much because it draws you in too much. This is from the greatest commentary on Tanakh, right? Rashi himself, right? That's how he understands Yigayin. There are other ways to understand Yigayin. When we get to Chavches, we will discuss them. But for the moment now, Rashi Lashitase, Mikra is Kairei, Mishnah is Isaac. Okay? But let's do the next Rashi. So the next Rashi is an unbelievable Rashi. Rashi says, "What does it mean, Gemara?" Right, the next line there in the drush of the pasuk is "L'hayrosam ze Gemara." So Rashi says, "Svaras taimei mishnayos." These are the underlying reasons for the mishnahs. Shemimenu yetzel hayra, because from this comes out how you are going to be paskening. And then Rashi adds in something that I don't know that he had to add in, but he nevertheless decided to add it in. It's a classic. The Gemara tells us there in Saita, Aval HaMeirim Hayra min HaMishnah, but those who are Meira Hayra from a Mishnah directly, Nikru Mavale Ha'olam, they are called the destroyers of the world. Why? Because they don't have the background. You can't pass them from a Mishnah. And have you note on as an aside that the same thing happened from any codification. The Rambam wrote in Akdama to the Mishnah Torah that he wanted people to study just the Mishnah Torah and they wouldn't have to study the Talmud anymore because he saved you all the time of having to go through the back and the forth of the Gemara. And lest you think that the Rambam didn't mean that, which he actually says in the letters, obviously never meant it, but it was clearly understood by those that he actually meant it, including Rishonim like the Meiri, for example, who thought he meant it, and other Rishonim who felt that he meant it. So people are upset that he doesn't give you the back and the forth, and he doesn't give you the names, he doesn't give you all the things that to work out what you should be passing like. The same thing happened with the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch wrote his major commentary, the Beis Yosef, by giving you all the back and the forth. When he wrote the actual Shulchan Aruch, he took it all out. He's making a concise codification. When it came out, the Yamshel Shlomo was furious, right? He wrote in the Hakdama to Masechah Schula, and the Yamshel Shlomo writes that, how do you pass it from the Shulchan Aruch? And the same complaint was registered not just by the Maharsha and the Yamshel Shlomo, but also the Maharsha and Sota and Chav Beis. The Maharsha writes the same thing. You can't pass it from the Shulchan Aruch. Right? They were more comfortable with the Torah because the Torah brought a lot of the back and the forth. He brought down different names. Who holds like this? Who holds like that? So no, doesn't do any of that. Right? So you have the Marshal, you have the Maharsha. The Maharal also, by the way, the Maharal was also very against it. If you look at the Sivas Olam, the Sivat Torah, they're in Parak Tesvav, the Maharal is very against the Shulchan Aruch as well. Like, how do you like? It's one thing the Torah, but the Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't give you anything. So I'll just tell you the Piskei Tshuva, huh? The Piskei Tshuva writes in your day Reish Mem Beis that he says like this. The Piskei Tshuva says that all those complaints are true. There is a truth there. You pass it from the Shulchan Aruch, like you're passing from the Mishnah, you'll destroy a world. You don't understand anything. He says, but that's only true in their days. In the days of the Marshal, the Maharsha, the Maharal, when they all lived in the 1600s. He says, but today we have the Magen Avraham, and we have the Taz, we have the Shach, we have the Small, we have so many commentaries. You right? If you look at Shulchan Aruch today, you can't read a page. It's like, it's like one line, and then you got a billion of commentaries. So today you can pass on the Shulchan Aruch because everybody's looking at all the commentaries, and the commentaries bring down all the back and the forth. So it's like, again, you're learning from the Gemara, and therefore you could again pass it. All right, continues the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, a person who's reading, who's saying the Shema at night by his bed. I should point out, I didn't mention already, the Meiri says that what does it mean, Kriya Shema Mitasa? It doesn't mean literally Mitasa. He says only the low lives, they say Shema, and they're not dressed in the bed, like that's not appropriate. You say the Shema, some of the Mitasa with seriousness. But the Shulchan Aruch's pasha, no, you say it al mitasa, you say it on your bed, in your bed. So Rabbi Yitzchak says, "Kol akar kriyash mal mitasa kilu adichez chav shotei." You know what a double-edged sword is? A double-edged sword is a sword that is sharp on two sides. Right? You can slice and beat up people like both ways. So so somebody who says Kriya Shema when they're going to bed, it's like he has a double-edged sword. Shnema remes el b'greinam, v'chev pipiyes b'yadam. They have the shivas of the shbachas of the Rebbeinu Shalom in their throats, and it's like they're holding a double-edged sword. My mashram, what does that have to do with anything that has to do with Shema? Marzuch b'tim Ravashi Meresha. Then you look at the pasuk before. They said Yazu Chasidim b'chavayid, Yiran Lamishkevaysa. Right, the Chasidim they're jumping around, right, the praising of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Where on their beds, they're singing on their beds. So that's like they're holding a cher PPS biyad. That's like they're holding a double-edged sword. Fine. Rabbi Yitzchak. Unless I said a question on the Meiri, why do you have to go to the Yerushalmi to tell you that if you read Kriyash Mal Mitzvah, that you're not going to have mazikin? You don't have mazikin because Pashat, you have a Gemara right here, and the Bavli tells us the same thing, that anybody who reads the Kriyash Mal Mitzvah, so he doesn't have mazikin. Again, I'm not getting into whether or not mazikin exists or not. We'll save that for another time. But for the moment now, so somebody who says there's Kriyash Mal Mitzvah, he's not going to have any mazikin bothering him. Fine. Says the Gemara, Shenamar b'nei Rashav yagbiu uf ve'ein uf el Torah. B'nei Rashav, the sparks, they will take flight, and they won't be bothering you. And what do we mean? Ve'ein uf el Torah. That how these the sons of sparks, these mazikin, why are they going to take flight? They're going to take flight because of the Torah. Shenamar hisif einacha boy ve'einenu. Fine. Ve'ein Rashav el mazikin. And how do we know that Rashav has anything to do with mazikin? Again, the pasuk there in Pasha Pshat and Azinu is not necessarily dealing with mazikin, but it's dealing with famine. It's dealing with destruction that we're going to have, chas v'shalom. And so, what we're dashing out is that, as Rashi points out, this hunger there is mazikin, and that is what is causing this terrible destruction. So therefore, what we are saying now is that we have Rasha that teaches us that it's mazikin. Of is Torah. So how do the Torah is going to make flight to the mazikin? How? Because it has obviously some special purpose and powers. If we say Kriyash Malamita, that's like Torah. It's going to push away the mazikin. This is the basic idea over here. Rashi adds on that that there is a shade, which is the shade of the tzaraim, the shade of the afternoon, which is known as Ketev Meriri. So then, if that's the case, then you have the pasuk of Mizei V'Chume Rasha V'Ketev Meriri. So you have literally the name given here, and so therefore it's going to be taking flight as a result of the Shema. How is the mazik of the tzaraim, the mazik that's going to be at night on the Kriyash Malamit? I'm not sure, but we'll leave that for another time. Rav Shimon Lakish, Kala Isik B'Torah Yisurim B'Delin Heimenu. Rish Lakish says that whoever is Isik in Torah is not going to have any Yisurim. Yisurim will leave him. What does that mean? Look at the Gemara later on the page, the bottom of the Gemara here on Hey. You see, Tanya Rav Shimon, and what are the three things that are coming out of Yidei Yisurim? One of them is Torah. So already the Ibitz points out that obviously we don't hear mean that you're not going to have any Yisurim. It means Yisurin that are going to cause you to be battle Torah, but obviously you're going to have other types of Yisurin. I have a different answer. My answer is based upon the Gemara in Erevin on Chaf Beis. The Gemara tells us there, Shcheres Ka'erev, a person in order to have success in Torah is going to be Shcheres Ka'erev. It's going to be black like a raven. What does it mean? So Gemara has different explanations. One of the explanations is the person has to be an achsar ka'erev. Erev is considered to be a particularly nasty bird, nasty to its young. The only way to have success in Torah is to be nasty to your family because you're always busy learning. You don't have time for them. So maybe that's what Rav Shimon means. It's not necessarily Yisurin from physical ailments and like it's Yisurim, just to be able to become a real Talmid Chacham requires a person to be, in a sense, a certain level of achzarius because he's not caring about necessarily the daily needs of every of his family. He's not spending the time that otherwise would be required to spend with them. No practical implications are meant to be taken from that line, just to be clear. Rab Shimon Lakish, Kol Esek B'Torah Yisurin B'Delim. Remember, Rish Lakish says that whoever studies Torah is going to not have Yisur, and Shnem B'Nei Reshef Yigbiu Uf, Be'inuf Ela Torah. So again, the same pasuk that Torah is compared to Uf. Shnem Hisef Einach Aboy V'Nenu. Be'ein Reshef El Yisurin, and Reshef is Yisurin. So before Reshef is the Mazikin, now it's Yisurin. Again, if Reshef now means Yisurin, and now we're saying Reshef means Mazikin, now it means Yisurin. Either way, it's going to go away if you have Torah. So now we have a response to this new vart of Reish Lakish that says that you're not going to have Yisurin if you study Torah. So Rabbi Yochanan says, "I'm Rabbi Yochanan ha'afilu t'negel shel b'Yisrael ben yoyden I say." Right, even the small children know, as Rashi points out, this pasuk of Bnei Reshef Yigbiu Uf is a pasuk in Eiv, and Rabbi Yochanan is saying you don't need to go to Eiv to know that if a person studies Torah, he's not going to have Yisurin. I know that already from earlier, from Paras B'Shalach, because the pasuk says Shenem Vayemim Shemed Shemel Lekel Hashem Lekecha Vayashor Beinav Taaseh V'Azantel Mitzvos V'Shemad Kol Chutav V'Amachal Shasamtim Mitzrayim Lo Yasem Malach Ki Hashem Refecha. Already the Torah told us that you're not going to have Yisurin if you keep the Torah. We really learned that in Paras B'Shalach. I don't need to go to Eiv to learn that. Number one, you see this, it's a beautiful thing from Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is always the one who would go to the kids and say to the kids, P'sakli P'sukecha, look at Tainus on test, look at Yuma on Sadi Beis. There's many times Rabbi Yochanan always says that it's one of his things. So he knows what the kids know because he's the one who always asking the kids what they know. So that's number one. Number two, you see that it was expected the kids would study Tanakh, not merely to study a bit of Chumash. They studied all the way down to Iyai. Okay. I shouldn't say that's not 100% proven. They studied at least Chumash. Maybe they didn't get to Iyai, but at least from the Lashon HaGemara, it's clear that Rabbi Yochanan felt that they would know Chumash decently enough that even if they never got to Iyai, they would already know this kind of a lesson. All right. Nevertheless, continues the Gemara. So what is Rabbi Yochanan's vart then? If every kid knows that if you study Torah, you're not going to have Yisurin, then what's the big vart? Somebody who's able to be Isaac in Torah, he's not Isaac in Torah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mevel of Yisurim Mechul Aron V'Eichan. Hashem brings on him very ugly, disgusting Yisurim. Shnemen Elamti Demiach Shesi B'Toiv V'Cha'eve Nichar. Ve'in Toiv Ela Torah Kilakach Shnemer Kilakach Toiv Nasati Lechem Torasi Al Ta'azevu. The Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. It's not a vart that you cannot have Yisurin if you study Torah, but rather if you don't study Torah and you could have studied Torah, then Hashem will bring on you Yisurin. See that the midah of Rebbeinu Shalom is different than the midah of people. Midas basav adam mecher adam mecher chavetz lachaver. A person sells something to his friend. Mecher atzav lekiach sameach. When a person sells something, the seller is always sad and the buyer is happy. But the Rebbeinu Shalom is not like this. Nasalem Torah Yisrael. Hashem gave the Torah to the Jewish people, and He's happy. Amar Rav of Item Rav Chizda Imraya Adam Shesuim Boin Allah Yifash Reish Remaisa. These are massive Gemaras. These are like lifetime learning Gemaras, and we don't have quick ways to go through them. Nevertheless, we have to barrel through. So the Gemara says if a person sees that you have Yisurin coming on them, they should think about their Maisim. As we say in the davening on Mondays and Thursdays, should check what you've done. So what happens if a person checked? Right? They have a pinkus. They check every single day. What did they do? And they write it down, right? Like the Rebbe Ramailach and Reb Zundel, Reb Zisha, I'm sorry, their brother, the third brother, the innkeeper, he used to write down everything in his pinkus what he did wrong, and then he would cry on it till he would erase it with his tears. So the person looked at his pinkus, he has nothing wrong, there's nothing there. The pishba is like matzi it'll be bittul Torah. He should tie it onto bittul Torah. So a person should then, if a person has nothing wrong that he's done, then he should say it's bittul Torah. As long as he has looked for bittul Torah and he doesn't even have bittul Torah. Who doesn't have bittul Torah? This guy doesn't have bittul Torah. Then you know for sure that these are yisurin shalav shenemar ki es asher. Yeah, have Hashem mechiach. Whoever Hashem loves, Hashem also is mechiach. Like the Gemara tells us in Yevamos and Samach Dal, the Gemara says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is misavel tfilos and shel tzadikim. Right, this week's parsha Again, another var, 3 times var in this week's parasha, right? The Gemara tells us there about why the Avis and Imas were infertile, why they didn't have babies, was in order to make them daven. Whenever Hashem loves, Hashem gives him Yisurin. Hashem gives Yisurin to those who he really likes. Right? Again, another Gemara in Yavamas on Kuf Aleph on Mabezid, the Gemara tells us that Kodesh Baruch Hu him with his tzaddikim, with his chavivim, kechut hasayra. So everybody who Hashem loves, Imam gives them Yisurim. It's a love tap. Yochel, if you like kibla me'ava, what if a person doesn't want to accept them? And we have many stories of people who did accept them. Looked in Gemara in Bamatzia on Pei Hey about Rabbi Shimon. You'll have a Gemara here on the next page. We'll see other Gemaras about people who didn't want it, or sometimes they did want. So what happens if a person doesn't want to do Yisurim Shalava? Yochel, people like kibla me'ava tamlam im tosam asham nafshem ma'asham ladas af Yisurim ladas im kibla maskar. What happens if a person wants to accept the Yisurim Shalava? Then what's the skar? Yir azera yarch yom. If a person accepts his Yisurin Shalava, then he will have success in learning. One says the definition of Yisurin Shalava is somebody who doesn't have any bittul Torah. What is Yisurin Shalava? It's kol she'en bittul tefillah. So the machlokes is whether or not the person is Yisurin Shalava if he doesn't have bittul Torah, or a person is Yisurin Shalava doesn't have bittul tefillah. Shneimar Baruch Elokim asher leheset tefillos v'chaz demeiti. Amalu Rabbi Abba Bereder Rav Chia Bar Abba Hachi Amar Rav Chia Bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yechanan El Be'el Yisurin Shalava. Actually, could be Yisurin Shalava if a person doesn't have any bittul tefillah. Could be a Yisurin Shalava if a person doesn't have any bittul Torah. Shneimar Kes Asher Yahav Hashem Yechiach El Matam Lo Mitaros V'Tamdenu Al Tikri Tlamdenu El Tlamdenu. We learn out from the Torah itself. That what? It's just like we know that Shein Va'ayin ever goes free if he knocks out the owner, knocks out a Shein Va'ayin. So Yisurin Shemarach can go Gufay Shel Adam Achas Kam V'Kam. Then of course Yisurin should take up a whole person's body. Obviously, it's going to go. Le'elu is going to go unbelievable. We see a word bris when it comes to salt, right? The v'lo sashbris melech bris alikecha me'al mechasecha, and also says bris by Yisurin shnemar nembris b'melech the v'lo sashbris bris melech bris alikecha, but nembris b'Yisurin the siv ela divrei bris ma bris am b'melech melech mamtegas esabasa. Just like the bris that says by the salt, by the carbon, you have to by meat it makes it sweet. So too bris. So too, bris and just so too Yisurin that a person is going to get on the body are also going to make a person be that much more sweet as well. There's 3 things that the Rebbe Shalom gave to the Jewish people, and they only gave them with Yisurin. Elohein Torah v'Eretz Yisrael v'Olam Haba. Torah Eretz Yisrael and Olam Haba. Torah Minayin Shnei Asher Gever Shetziyasem and Come to Us from Danu. Eretz Yisrael. The Siv Kikashi Yatzer Ishas B'nai Hashem Lekech Miyatzer Aga. The Siv Basik Hashem Lekech Mivyach Eretz Teva. What about Olam Haba? The Siv Kiner Mitzvah Torah or B'derech Chaim Teichei Musar. So in the end, as we just ran through, essentially the whole Amud here discussing Yisurin. Yisurin will go away from a person if they are studying. If a person nevertheless has Yisurin, it will probably be because of Averis. If not, it'll be because of Bittul Torah. If not, because of Bittul Torah, it'll be Yisurin Shalava. And fundamentally, Yisurim are going to make a person be going straight into Olam Haba, and at the end of the day, Torah, Olam Haba, and Eretz Yisrael only given out the Yisurim.